The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley, the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall continue to follow me all the days of this protracted experience of death. I will dwell in the house of what I am forever. What's happening? Benton here, rolling out early, headed towards the greater Boston area, I suppose. Apparently, it's a first come, first served on the delivery. My rate confirmation, as they call it, rate con says 8:30 a.m. is when they start receiving, but the earlier I leave, the less traffic, perhaps. My strategy yesterday mimicked Saturday, which was to just go slow. I think what I figured out about people in their driving over the weekend is, folks, Scotty boy, what's happening, brother? Shout out to the chat. Shout out to the replay crew. I think it's like the holiday hangovers. You know, people have had their festivities, their feasts, ate too much, drank too much, a lot of them. And people were, it was just in straight up slow motion yesterday. You know, it's fair enough. It's Sunday. It was Sunday, but I was pretty astonished at how slow I was able to drive. And not that many people were, you know, blowing right past me. It's kind of interesting to see that effect. And, you know, depression, I think, is probably a thing also. A depressed society, perhaps, in many ways. Back to the hustle and bustle, right? Monday morning. And apparently my dispatcher is on vacation. Interesting when people get hired for a job. Apparently this fellow just started this job and already had a vacation scheduled paid for. Number one, who's taking vacations these days? I mean, good on him, but I didn't realize that was still a thing. Well, and that's right, Scotty boy, the end of the season, but you know, I'm more looking at I agree, and so yes, and you know, what state that puts people in with the activities of the holidays. So I think, you know, and not that many people I talked to over the holidays were aghast that I was working, but in some ways, I think that's the better way to go. Not to work necessarily, but you know, why deviate from the normal schedule? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And any other cliches that we could trot out. Hang on, Well, I'm truck driving. So truck driving is nothing like other jobs when it comes to days off. So my typical work week is 7 days. That's typical. Yeah, truck driving, over the road trucking doesn't really translate to, and I hope you'll take this in the spirit in which it's intended. It doesn't cross over to chit chat with other people who aren't in trucking. And I don't consider myself a truck driver or a trucker necessarily, and that's what I do first and foremost to have a place to lay my head, and of course for money as well, but mainly to pay for food and clothing and footwear and stuff. Can't call them basics, but subsistence level living, I guess would be the way to phrase it. So yeah, it's truck driving as subsistence, but when we get into the chit chat, sort of relating to other humans, it doesn't cross over. And generally, and then a lot of folks, and I don't know that Scotty Boy falls into this, but almost every time I bring up truck driving, just in the course of what could be small talk chit chat, I'm almost always greeted with, "Oh well, my grandfather or my dad or my uncle or my son's, older lady maybe. My son's a truck driver," and especially in decades past, it's viewed sort of whimsically and romantically, right? Some, you know, keeping America moving and, the open road and all of these things. And, it's nothing, and I wasn't doing it decades ago, but it's nothing like what it was. Certainly. By the time I started in 2018, it was already not that. And the romance was long dead. And, it's only further changed since 2018. So, and I think I enjoy more and more the what do you call, um, sort of having a unique, in some ways, experience in that regard. It's sort of different, separate from a lot of people. Gen pop, and I maintain a list of around 20,000 reasons why most people would never do this job. But yeah, I don't know. You said you haven't been around for a while, so I don't know if you're aware of the context of that Benton here has beaten the game within the last year, completed the main mission of unlocking the achievement of true knowledge of self/self-realization after on the heels of many, many, many years of daily spiritual practice. And if you look at the description for the stream, and I've said this in the past, that Alan Watts, if we know who that is in the truth community, he even talked about, he used an example of a man from Arkansas, and that's where I hail from. If a person, basically a person with limited framework, which would not be me, but in the example of Alan Watts, he's talking about if just some random man from Arkansas was to have a direct experience of Christ, the next thing you know, he's running around telling everybody that he's Jesus. And, because that's the framework that he was taught, culturally, and it's the Bible Belt. And certainly at my age, even if my parents hadn't been insane, and I was never a Jehovah's Witness, if my parents hadn't been insane Jehovah's Witnesses, these effects still would have existed in the Bible Belt where I grew up. A lot of Bible pumping, but so I do tend to speak mostly in a biblical or a so-called Christian context, but all religion is man-made and demonic, certainly. It's important to note out of the gate. So true knowledge of self is to know with absolute uh, I can't even say certainty. It's to no longer be able to be uncertain. And what I've found is that in this inverted world exists to make an enemy of what I am. So when Christ in the Bible said, I am the way, I am the truth, I am the life, well, that's what I am. What I am is the way, but not Benson the performer, not Benson the personality, the psyche, or the collection of experiences. The actual, you know, uh, essence, the real thing, which is an indivisible force, which is also borne out uh, with statements attributed to Christ in the Bible. So, in understanding and apprehending exactly what I am, I now know exactly, or more or less exactly, what this place is. And the best description I've come up with is vacuous, delusory, adversarial realm of business transactions. That's what this place is. And it's actually created on behalf of antithesis, because it seems like all of the philosophers agree, well, there has to be something, meaning there can't be a complete lack and void of anything whatsoever. So in order for there not to be no thing, then there must be something. And the moment we have something, there is assertion or thesis or proposition. So antithesis is then comes along for the ride. It always exists. Antithesis. And, that's actually, it's the idea that this is a world of abundance. How many times have we heard that? No, that's a lie. This is a world based on the lack of abundance. What I am is abundance. So this realm exists, in opposition to what I am. And in fact, based on lacking the characteristics of what I am. And again, not Benson the performer or Benson the personality. The true essence. And within the context of human so-called experience, it's to uncover and walk the righteous, perfected path that lies within, because part of the demonic aspects of the Bible is mostly tied to the Gospels of the Apostle Paul, Saul of Tarsus, and who bastardized the gospel of Christ. And certainly was not who and what he claimed to be in the Bible. Obviously. But based on the writings of Paul, and some would refer to Christianity as Pauline Christianity. Many of the ideas attributed to him, that Christian religion was founded in those ideas. It's this idea that there's no possibility for righteousness coming from man, because it's heavily implied that, well, there's already been a Jesus, and he lived up to this standard where every moment of his life, apparently, he expressed righteously. But because in each new moment, now it's here, now it's gone, now it's here, now it's gone, based on the delusion and illusion of time, space, location, place, which is also not possible. Only when accounting for waking dreams, surrealistic, unreality, deja vu all over again is such a thing even possible. Right. Meaning this place can never be altogether real. It's not possible. And in fact, all error based on true knowledge of self, and I'm only speaking for myself and my own experience, because I have no way of, I can't confirm or disconfirm that other beings are possessed of what I referred to as Nancy Pelosi's MS-13 spark of divinity, if anybody remembers. We don't need to character assassinate Nancy Pelosi and Democrats. That's not the point. The point is, when somebody mentioned, MS-13, she said, well, they have the spark of divinity. And more or less, what she meant was, well, they're humans, so we have to treat them as if they are potentially divine, right? And I'm not saying I agree with that. I'm saying she was, clearly doing a specific sort of thing there, sort of a trick or a play on words in a way. But the idea of this little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine, which is in fact mockery. That song is this realm mocking what I am, and a lot of what goes on day to day, I've found in mocking and ridiculing. And in fact, this realm that makes an enemy of what I am, its goal is to have the individuated being, in this case Benton, commit blasphemy in the Holy Spirit, which is to treat one's blessing or the blessing of what I am as if it were a curse. And in fact, it turns out that virtually all beings, and I'll just speak for the United States, are sacrificed to a pagan deity known as Moloch shortly after their birth by mostly their parents and certainly these systems of things. And that's by being sacrificed symbolically and literally to Moloch's machine of industrial and post-industrial society. So now we see why the child is risen and is raised up, socialized, indoctrinated through the public school system or private schools or universities and all of these employment in order to be molded into addressable corporate units that are useful to the vacuous, delusory, adversarial realm of business transactions, which is, there's nothing in society that's not based on business transactions. And I mean nothing whatsoever. Perhaps a mother's love for her child, but then even that is connected pretty quickly to transacting. And so now you get into the biblical notion of the love of money is the root of all evil. Well, what did Christ do in the Bible? Well, people love to talk about he was a carpenter. Well, after baptism, Christ Jesus did not work a job, did not accrue tax liability, and did not handle money. Think about that. He had to say, hey, when questioned about tax paying, he asked for someone to produce a coin, which is in some way an acknowledgement that he presumably did not have a coin. And so this idea of render unto Caesar, meaning pay your tax. Well, the church that attaches itself to the writings of Paul to say render unto Caesar, well, it turns out how can the church not pay taxes while telling you to pay your taxes? Number one. What else do you need to know? Number two, it actually render unto Caesar has the same meaning as let the dead bury the dead, because everything that can trace its origins to this world of death and game of lies is dead, including money, jobs, finances. It's all dead. The physical body's dead. Your pets are dead. That they contain no life and no possibility for life. And so this world seems to be alive based on the animated death warmed over aspects of the subversion of the creative force of what I am. See, it's become subverted. See. And there, again, Christ in the Bible talking about he was accused at one point of casting out demons in the name of Beelzebub. And see, this is an inverse of the idea. See, what was actually being conveyed is not what was seemingly being conveyed. So Christ says, well, if hate drives out hate, Satan's kingdom or the kingdom of antithesis, is divided against itself and cannot stand, which is an acknowledgement that, the kingdom of air quote so-called God must be indivisible, meaning it's not possible to break off a little chunk of an indivisible force and then insert it into a human body and then put it into this place. That's not even possible, right? For what I am is always one with an indivisible force, the most super intelligent power, source, and force of love and creation at the highest levels of vibrational frequency, a quickening spirit. So when the Bible says no weapon formed shall prosper, that's because the spirit, or the what I am, it's always able to vibrate quicker because it cannot be limited in its vibrational speed. It's unlimited vibrational speed. So the attacks or the weapons of that which makes an enemy of what I am, because what I am would never even create an enemy, or it was not capable of creating contention or strife in the first place. It doesn't know how to do that. So it doesn't have enemies. This world makes an enemy of what I am. See, I'm the real thing, or more correctly, what I am is the real thing. This world, based on the lack of all of those characteristics, is seeking via something resembling the movie Devil's Advocate, to at some point be able to pause the computer simulation aspects of this thing, and to to appeal via legalese and say, well, if each one of these individuated, beings within the dead human flesh, if none of their, little lights are shining, then, the prosecutor, antithesis's prosecutor, wants to be able to make the legal argument that, well, up until now, it's been a foregone conclusion that, air quote, so-called God is, the highest of the high, all powerful. And so it's to actually supplant and replace, and this is Antichrist. We're now talking about Antichrist. It's to actually supplant, overthrow, and replace what I am. And to have, in fact, the antithesis, or the lack of love, the lack of abundance, the lack of power, the lack of authority, the lack of justice, to have that become authoritative and have that become what humanity bows down to. And, clearly that's what's being seen. Humanity is bowing down to all of that. Humanity continues to bow down to that. And Benton can't do anything about that whatsoever. So when hearing that, many will say, okay, Benton, what's your solution? I'm glad you asked. I've already enacted it, because Benton's only power in the context of time, space, location, place, this delusory and illusory realm, my only accessible power and meaning lies within myself, inside of myself, on behalf of what I am. So I've already resolved what needed to be resolved internally, and continue to do so, where appropriate. And that's, so back to Paul's idea that, well, we've already had a Jesus, you ain't him. So please understand that, it's not possible to express righteously in each new moment. Absolutely it is. They say, well, are you claiming that? Absolutely I'm claiming righteousness, because that's the reality. What I am is incapable of unrighteousness. Only when improperly identified with this realm, by taking it too seriously and treating it as if it was possibly could represent authority or justice or substance or meaning. That's the process whereby the being then begins to manifest unrighteousness, right? Which is something that belongs to this realm of death, and it belongs to the dead flesh, because what I am doesn't know anything about that. It doesn't know what you're talking about when you get into unrighteousness. So it's not even possible, because what I am can't ever be marred or stained by this place. It can't be touched by so-called sin, iniquity, decadence, things that are ugly. It can't even experience that except in this place. See? And even then it's never completely real. And so when folks say, well, this America, this world, financially and variously is not sustainable, I say, yes, absolutely it's sustainable. What are you talking about? It's sustained by the subversion of the creative force of what I am, which is the continuous overflowing of the Spirit, something that never had a beginning and will never have an end, that will never know death. Its worshiper and object of worship contained within the same space, my cup runneth over. See? In the continuous renewing of the Spirit, which is like a perpetual motion or a inexhaustible energy source, right? Never ending infinite expansion and creation, right? So yes, it is. This delusory realm is absolutely sustainable. Now, will it reset? Do the computer simulation aspects reset? Yeah, probably. I have no knowledge of that, but yeah, probably. So anyway, I think that's a pretty good synopsis of what I've been up to, in case you were curious. Pretty good synopsis. I know I left some things out, but close enough. It's good to go back and sort of recap, because not everybody, some people are new to the streams, or they've been gone for a while and now they're back. Um, it's good to sort of provide a framework or a context for the continuing progression of the spiritual and other discourses around here. I do want to state for the record that this is the highest level. This channel has exhibited the highest levels of thinking over time in the so-called truth community. And, the continued progression of the ideas, it's certainly been, I don't know that pride would be the proper term, but it's something that you love to see it, right? You love to see it indeed. So in fact, I now, and so with back to the Bible verses in the description of these streams, the YouTube description, John 14:26, talking about the Comforter, which is the Holy Ghost, will teach me all things and bring unto remembrance. That certainly is, that's been happening for many years and continues to happen. And so now, further able to decode with discernment the Bible and to, interpret it on behalf of me for my own purposes in service of me, right? Because this is a wholly individual experience spiritually, to be sure. Well, they're making me do too much driving today. I thought I was going to go slow. But that's not in the cards based on the way the traffic's shaking out. It ain't in the cards. Unless the hills are over with. We were on such a hill climb, and we're fairly lightly laden. So it's like this truck looked like I thought they were going 65 or faster. I get behind them, we're immediately going 60. And this one thing about driving at night, you can't really see the hills. So are we going up a hill now? And I just couldn't see it. And I've been talking about for a while that this realm does not have real physics. You know, how was I hauling ass at 68, and then the next thing it's like, okay, I'm barely catching up to this guy, and then I'm like, might as well get behind him. The minute I get behind him, we're going 60. It's not like he's really slowed down or put the brakes on, right? It's just for whatever reason, the patterns have decided, well, you're not going to go slow, buddy. You're gonna pass everybody. All right. Well, I guess we're gonna pass everybody. So I can go 60 or I can go 70. I can't go that speed limit of 65. Impossible. That is impossible. And now I'm barely able to pass him, and I'm going 72 down a hill. Just barely able to get over in front of him. So you'll never convince me that's real. Doesn't make any sense mathematically. It's not how that should work. And so the major effect initially of this unlocking of the achievement of true knowledge of self was to recognize that what I am can't experience fear, anxiety, depression, sorrow, heavy-heartedness. That it's literally impossible for what I am to experience that, or to actually to conceptualize it. Now, it certainly has experienced it, seemingly, if only maybe by imagination. But that's again on behalf of antithesis in the context of time, space, location, place, through the subversion of the creative force of what I am. See? Oh, I don't know, Glenn. Thankfully, I'm not smart enough. Glenn's asking about the mathematics and the physics. That's a good question. Yeah, that fortunately that's left to larger brains than mine. I'm simply lack the horsepower to get into that. So there are advantages to being a layperson. Yes, indeed. Good to see you, sir. Now we're getting into the traffic. I've yet to scout out what the location I'm delivering to looks like. So I guess we'll deal with that when we get closer. Only about an hour out at the moment. Hello, am I here? I don't know. The screen went off for some reason. Not the screen. Why did the screen turn on? Maybe I can find a little spot to pull over when I get close, so I can scout out the delivery. So number one is don't get trapped. It's very much possible to drive one of these rigs into an area that's very difficult to get out of. So do everything I can to avoid that. Certainly. Yeah. Here's one of the absurdities of the realm. You know, my normal work week is 7 days, and you know the hours of service is based on the idea of 14-hour daily clock. And if you the company's headquartered in Illinois or incorporated in Illinois, and so if I work 13, it's like 13.3 or something, 13.28 hours a day for 7 days, then if you factor in time and a half over 40 hours, I make exactly Illinois state minimum wage doing this job. $1,800 a week, 93 hours. And sometimes I work more than 93, and sometimes it's not that many, but it's effectively minimum wage. And it's long haul trucking, you know, it's effectively minimum wage or less, really. I mean, realistically, that's what you're looking at. Add that to the 20,000 reasons why most people would never do this job, the low pay. It's like, yeah, if I can live in the truck, have no commute, I don't have a car at this time. You know, that's a personal choice. I could buy one if I wanted to, but I think can't say I'm done forever, but I might be done. Probably done for a while. Whoever's in front of me must know this road. They slowed way down, and then there was a bunch of potholes. Well, I crashed into a gigantic one earlier. You know, these trucks are like $220,000 now. You know, the idea of being an owner operator, it's like, who wants to? Yeah, go buy a $220,000 truck and then go crash it into these gigantic potholes. Yeah, it doesn't seem very appealing to me. There's this YouTube channel, Trucking the Seven Seas. This guy started out as a company driver, worked his way, you know, then he was a lease operator for the same company that he started with, and then he bought his own truck and leased on to another company, Landstar, and then he got his own authority and, you know, pays for all his own expenses, insurance and everything, you know, plates. And really, what's only the main thing that's interesting about his channel is he breaks down his numbers every week, so you see all of his facts and figures on how he's running his business. He was making on a, because he's on a 1090, he's incorporated, right? So, so I'm on a 1099, so I'm expected to pay the taxes, myself, and there's no withholding out of my paycheck. And since he got, I don't know if it's his all time or since he got his own authority, he's averaging on a weekly basis, he's making pretty much exactly what I'm making. Now, he works less than me some of the time. I have noticed that. He likes to take a lot of time off here and there. But he was until lately. He's had a lot of maintenance costs, and like his radiator blew up. Things that are just gonna happen. It's like, I just don't. To me, I never saw the point of why would I want to pay for all this when there's the trucking companies will pay for it. It just never made any sense to me. So I think he's starting to figure out this ain't the way to go. And you can't tell anybody anything. People have tried to tell him in his comments, like, "Hey, this is crazy. You're making like company driver money, but you've got all this liability, and if the engine blows up, it's a wrap. That'll wipe out quite a bit of profits, what you thought were profits." And I think he's fine. And people have to reach their own conclusion in most cases. Oh yeah, good time. But yeah, man, we got some good rest over the weekend. Certainly. Yes, indeed. Yeah. Old Benton here continues to be on the mend. So I would say one of the more controversial conclusions I've reached is the idea of, and this has happened to me a lot in the past before unlocking the achievement of true knowledge of self. I was getting accused of nihilism a lot, and others were as well. But the reality is, contextually, nihilism is real, meaning there is no possibility of, there's no accessible potential for meaning outside of what I am, meaning in the context of time, space, location, place, anything outside of my own, purview, internal space, there cannot be meaning there. It's not possible. At least not from my perspective. And I don't mean opinion, I mean my viewpoint, which in some ways the being is locked into that viewpoint. In some ways, part of the limitation of the experience, the protracted experience of death, more correctly. They call it, it's this idea of life. Well, that's a breakfast cereal. Mikey likes it. This is what I am is the way, what I am is the truth, what I am is the life. This This world is the lack of all of that. This is a protracted experience of death, which also is borne out in Christ's story. So I find all of that to be quite interesting, certainly. I got to just give up on passing. This is just not going to happen. I'm behind Prime, and they're known for going slow, but I guess he's given up on the fuel bonus. He's going slow up the hills, but he's hauling balls down the hill. They're usually trying to get the fuel bonus, driving slow. Now he's back to slow driving. Oh, he's exiting, and even better, even better. But fast. I'm certainly in no rush. I left quite early. Part of that is if I start my day too late, then I could potentially work too late also. I've already quit this job twice. So part of me not quitting for the third time is tied up in, my day needs to end at a reasonable hour. So if I start at 5:30, that means I can work till 7:30. Of course, that's we leave out the possibility of a split sleeper break, which can actually extend that even longer. So that's how we get to the idea of working more than 93 hours a week potentially. Because if I'm not on my own time, I'm working as far as I'm concerned. So once my day starts, I'm on the clock in some form or fashion till my day ends. That ends up being 17 hours, and sometimes it does. Well, if we're already averaging 13.28 a day, then now we're making less than federal minimum wage. I'm sorry, Illinois state minimum wage. We'd still be above federal though, which is hilariously still 7.25. But I don't really think there should be a minimum wage in the first place, in my opinion. Because I would say that's effectively minimum wage. It's really higher than that. $16 an hour, $18 an hour. Really minimum wage should just be whatever it would cost in a given area to, rent an apartment working 40 hours, whatever that is. And I'm talking about, with the minimum amount, subsistence level, right? It's got to be closer to $30 an hour in most areas. What's up, Bulk Hungry? And I guess what I was saying about the physics, Glenn, is like everything else here, they can't ever be entirely real. So they contain surreal elements, which the movie The Matrix seems to hint at. I think that's a lot of what that first scene with the Oracle and all that, and the kids bending the spoons and such. That's all quite surreal, unreal. The waking dream aspects of all of that. If you ask me, and that would all be tied up in physics and mathematics. The more Neo became aware of what he was in relation to the Matrix, he seemed to have a greater access to, bending or breaking, what was in his mind, what would have previously been the laws of physics. Again, I understand just a movie, but it's a helpful way to think about things, at least, or it can be. I never saw any of the John Wick stuff, so if that's what you mean. Both country, I'm almost entirely unfamiliar. Yeah, we're hitting traffic now, but slow my roll. It's a slowdown. Well, again, avoiding any details. We've got things moving in the right direction in the bowel department. So that's the major short term goal. One of the major short term goals for old Benton here. Get all that in order. As more and more of my health recovers and returns and is restored, the continued ongoing healing and restoration. And that's blessing right there. That is blessing. And Benton, individually, and this is the case for each of you as well. So, the idea of hope for humanity or, reformation of society, it's like the reality, the truth of the matter is beings will never coalesce and come together based on an individual apprehension or grasp. Well, grasp is not the right term, but you know, to uncover and walk the righteous perfected path that may lie within them. And a big part of what will keep people from ever even looking for it in the first place. Meanwhile, when Christ was asked where do we look for the kingdom? Well, the kingdom of air quotes so-called God is within you. Now, he didn't say it that way, but he didn't speak English, so it's already a translation. But some will say, well, there never was a Jesus. And I'm like, well, that's true. However, there never was a bit. And there never was a person talking to me saying there never was a Jesus. So, yeah, you're right. But it's all the same thing. Jesus Christ, the so-called Son of Man, that originated here. That's the dead flesh. That's humanity, right? or probably Jesus individually performing, right? Christ performing within the context of Son of Man. And, other individuals also, potentially falling into that definition of Son of Man. And so intelligence in many ways gets tied up with being able to apply proper context to these various concepts and to vigilantly, with focus and determination and mental energies, sort of follow one's way through that progression in order to remain properly identified, which again ensures righteousness. There's no fear. There's no, there's no need to even consider error, right? As long as I'm properly identified within myself based on what I know myself to be, that's the buck stops there. That ends any possibility of unrighteous expression. So therefore, the only way to unknowingly fall into so-called sin is by taking this realm too seriously. Why so serious? And that still happens to me, but then now we have the vigilance of the various practices and the meditation. So now I'm pretty quickly aware of the improper identification, and then that's where the spiritual technology of confess, repent, seek forgiveness, am forgiven like it never happened comes in. And that's also the spiritual concept that defeats Paul's lies. And I mean the Apostle Paul from the Bible, Saul of Tarsus' lies that, well, an individual can't meet the same standard of Christ's righteousness. It's like, that's not true. And number one, it's not a competition. Number two, what I am doesn't compete, or there are no competitors. Nothing can compete with what I am. And then with the forgiven like it never happened, it means, yeah, it never happened. So, in fact, as long as the being understands and is able to work with true repentance, but not a repentance based on outside authority, see, based on the authority of what I am. So what we see is there can't be organizations, there can't be churches. Like, none of this can have authority, because that authority is never, it always pales into comparison with the supreme authority of what I am. Meaning, now you get into the biblical concept of, is it two or three? I always forget, but where two or three or more are gathered in the name of, again, what I am, the way, the truth, and the life. They say, well, it says no one comes unto the Father. Say, well, okay, yeah, I hope you understand Jesus didn't have freedom of speech. He wasn't free. He had to encode his language. So what is meant there by the Father is true knowledge of self. No one comes unto the uncovering of that perfected righteousness within, except through what? Christ consciousness. What is Christ consciousness? It's the awareness of the victory over the flesh, over a world of death, the victory over games of lies, and the victory over this, just everything that's happening here. That's Christ consciousness. It's the awareness that that's at least initially possible, right? Now it gets attached to Jesus Christ and bastardized into a religion, a demonic man-made religion. But, the key concepts are absolutely valid and real. Which is to say, in my experience, the more I meditated on and the more I worked with those concepts, and then we get into no spiritual surrender means no spiritual victory, meaning, the yin forms, the passive, the accepting, the feminine. Meanwhile, let's not forget, in America especially, we're all indoctrinated that anything achievable is only achievable through a yang or a masculine or an assertive, what I call assertion, aggression, dominance. But let's remember, man will dominate man unto man's own injury. If you want a picture of the future, imagine a boot stamping on Luigi's face forever. And now, I don't want to even get into politics, so let's not even go there, but I shan't. So that's what Christ is talking about. What I am is the way, what I am is the truth, what I am is the life. Well, he can only speak for himself. Christ can't go around saying, well, this is the case for you individually, right? He could teach and lead, the old, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. Because remember, what Christ is can't ever put conditions on love. It can't ever put conditions on acceptance. See, what Christ is and was doesn't know how to do that. See, so it's actually not appropriate for Christ to, forcibly insert into other beings' individuated experience. So, the only one of the few chances that antithesis has to potentially carry the day is this concept of so-called free will. The individuated beings are able to act outside of legalese. Because remember, these demons, these fallen angels, these demonic entities, they have no choice. They have to follow the law. They don't get to make decisions outside of what they have legal requirements that they cannot. Now they can appeal to legalese. They can make an argument. They can try to bide their time, but when called to the carpet, they have no choice but to do as they're told. And so that's what my user text means, power over the power. Because one of the last times I was spiritually attacked over here by someone who, used to come around here, Mr. Miyagi, and maybe he still does, but I haven't seen him under that name. And I was preaching on something, and he said, well, doesn't Christ give you power over Satan and the demons? I said, well, you know what, buddy, I'm going to need you to quote me a verse on that. So he came up with, I think it was like Philippians. I don't remember what it was, but it was, of course, the writings of Paul. Surprise, surprise. And I think, actually, I might be misremembering, but it was an account of Christ. Enough followers were growing that Christ appointed. There was like 60 more or less volunteers available for the ministry. So he appointed them to go out two at a time. And he told them that not that they have power over Satan and demons. He said, you have power over the power. But he didn't call them Satan and demons. He used, other terms for, maybe like a shot caller demon and the minion demons, maybe. It's unclear. So no, power over the power, sir. And then again, see, the appointment is during the time of Christ. So see, the enemy will happily use the Bible and say, well, look, Benton, it's written here in the Bible. It's like, yeah, that was what was said to people who were bodily with Christ and who were appointed. I'll point you to John, I believe, 15:16, which says that Benton is ordained. And that's a completely different meaning than being appointed. I'm ordained. An ordination is way outranking of an appointment. In a context, anyway. See? So that number one doesn't apply to me. Number two, the scripture doesn't say power over. It says power over the power. Because it's not hate driving out hate. It's a different It's a superior power, as we see. Superior power. Ah, this would be a good place to pull over, but I guess I'm going to try to wait it out a little longer. I didn't quite see it quick enough anyway. Yeah. Well, and this channel's entertainment also. Paul Cundry's he's talking about, I guess John Wick is throwaway entertainment. Yeah, I'm sure it is. Um, but this channel also, right? If an individual takes something, from this, if they bring something into their internal space and they create a meaning, well, I didn't do that. They did that. So that, in fact, technically speaking, this channel is for entertainment purposes, and it is classified under entertainment. What's up, Catch 22? Yeah, I might have missed my best chance to stop. Traffic's rolling slow enough, and that was a wide spot. I could have pulled over and fairly easily merged back into traffic. Oh well. And then, of course, I've detected a lot of, we can call them agents, but I've already identified that, like it or not, each individual sacrificed us, and partially because of being sacrificed to Moloch, but you know, like it or not, virtually everyone functions as an agent of the system. What I've begun referring to as sysagents, Syagent, sysagent. And so then I talked about the idea of becoming a dissident sysagent to perform. It's a recognition that, well, the being is going to end up serving the system whether they like it or not. So to transcend what could be viewed as a limitation in some ways, the being could choose to operate in a dissident fashion. And I mean dissident, by definition, the definition of dissident, which I'm not able to look up just now. Hope I'm in the proper lane. Sometimes it's unclear, but this one was backing up the furthest, so I figured this is probably the one to shoot for. Because if we go down to one lane, this will probably be the lane they're all merging into. I'd rather be there, even if it. Well, that's the thing people don't realize about rushing to the front is like, yo, we're basically all going through that point in the same amount of time. It might seem like you rushing to the front gets a person through quicker. Yeah, maybe by 20 seconds, but effectively, we're all going past a fixed point up ahead. And if we're doing that single motherfucking file, it pretty much takes the same amount of time for everybody. There's really nothing that could. Now, the group can behave in ways that makes it take longer for everybody, and the group can behave in ways that makes it shorter for everybody. But, and kind of showing the power of what seems to be the power of demons and evil antithesis is that collectively, generally, people just unable to, they don't really have, even if they could conceptualize that, they don't really have the discipline or the emotional control they can't really help themselves most of the time. And that's not an excuse. That's just the actual reality. Still plowing snow. Another storm, eh? I hear there's good money in that, but I like everything else. I'm sure it's not all it's cracked up to be, right? Now we're getting into the needing to use the bathroom. Now it's coming on. Yeah, I think I done fucked up. Missed my chance. Maybe there'll be another one. Let's see. Oh yeah, see, we're going south. So yeah, see, I didn't even, we're backed up so far, I didn't even realize. Yeah, left lane goes north, right lane goes south. Yeah. I don't even attempt to memorize all the interchanges like some truckers. Because I'm not really a trucker. So it's something I perform from time to time. I guess I'm as much a trucker. I would identify more as a homeless person than I would a trucker. Oh, that's what I've been wanting to talk about. That Scotty Bear channel. This homeless dude. Maybe maybe later I'll share out some of his content. Kind of an interesting fella. He ended up spending a couple of years in Southeast Asia. And it's interesting because he seems to be one of these folks that, you know, seems willing to just sort of go by what I call the word of mouth, the word of mouthing of everything, the conventional wisdom, you know, and all of these things. So the latest thing is, and it's probably, I'm sure it's part of the, hang on, I got to make sure do I have to get over again? I guess I do. Yep. I guess one of these lanes is closed. Now, can I park on this shoulder? Get over. Will they let me over? I don't know. It is the Northeast, so they may not. Traffic ain't really flowing enough. Yeah, better not. So that is like a little service area, technically. Yeah, I don't know. Fuck it. A little distracted, but so I guess now, especially with all this, it's in the news regularly about the crackdowns and all of this in trucking, the enforcement and such. So I guess the word of mouth's really kicking up around this, and as the job market continues to tighten, people are trying to make money and all of this. The word of mouthing around trucking, it's ramping up again. So he claims that's what he's going to do is go get his CDL. So we'll see. I don't know. But he's already talked about, and I know he was joking, but it's like, yeah, it's funny because it's true. Because, he was saying a lot of people are telling me it's low pay for the first year, especially. And he's like, well, what they don't know is I'll drive the truck for free just to not have to sleep in my car, he said. But, he's not completely serious. I mean, he's still going to be paid, but, there's some truth to that too. And I've been predicting for a long time now that you have more and more of these long haul truckers are going to be actual homeless people like myself. Now here's a service area, but the problem in this part of the country is it's going to be so fucking jam packed. There's no point in even pulling in there. Yeah, no chance. Especially this time of day. I need to tinkle, damn it. But yeah, they keep the roads plowed in this part of the country. I can tell you that. Yeah, maybe we'll see, man. The winter, see what happens. So far, so good. From where you know, I've driven in a couple of snows, but nothing crazy. Another service area or what? No, it's just an exit, I think. Yeah. All right, bear with me, folks. I got to figure out where I can stop. I ain't gonna make 22 more minutes. Well, I could if I knew it wasn't going to be longer. Can't really guarantee that. Oh, I got my Amazon packages this morning. They got delivered yesterday. So stopping. We're doing it. ERB. I'm going to hustle up. I hate. And see, I'm crossing an on ramp, which is fraught with peril. It's a bit of a dangerous game there. Oh man. Ah shit. I hate when I forget to turn the fucking heater down in the sleeper. The damn sleeper's 90 degrees. Spend all this money on supplements and heat them up. That ain't cool. All right, let's go. All right, we're looking good so far. If nobody comes up that on ramp. Hey, we got lucky. Fucking four wheelers, man. The trucks got over for me, but those four wheelers, they plenty of room for them to make space for me. That's a just people being jerks because they can. Oh well, it happens. All right, it's time for watermelon. This watermelon's not that good, but it's actually I thought it was just I was going to throw it away, but it turned out to be at least edible. Get into some of that. A little spongy, but digestible at least. Anyway, I'm gonna get out of here. Thanks for watching. Bye.